I'm Jennifer, 32. Last night's family dinner smelled of roasted turkey and warm bread rolls. I'd hoped for a toast to my hard work, but instead a single sentence cut through the room and left me frozen, wondering how far they'd go this time. The house still holds that scent, a mix of herbs and polished wood, and I can remember every small detail as if it's etched into me. Candles flickered on the ivory tablecloth I'd saved up for jazz playing low from a speaker hidden behind the china cabinet. I'd spent days planning, believing that maybe this would be the night my parents finally noticed the years of quiet support. Before I tell you what came next, drop a comment about where you're watching from. And if you've ever felt overlooked by your own family, hit subscribe. You'll want to see how this ends. Daniel. My husband had teased me while carrying in the grocery bags earlier that day. "You're feeding an army," he'd said with a grin. I'd laughed, smoothing my hair back, pretending my hands weren't shaking with anticipation. For 5 years, I'd covered bills, repairs, even health insurance without a word. This was supposed to be the night they'd look at me and see more than a daughter who got by. The dining room glowed under the soft chandelier light chairs, pulled close plates waiting. I moved between kitchen and table, checking glasses, lighting candles, rehearsing in my mind how I might tell them about the promotion at work. In the corner of my phone screen, a bank notification still blinked the morning's transfer sent without fail. It was habit now, automatic like breathing. Family trickled in as dusk settled outside. Mark, my younger brother, arrived, late eyes fixed on his phone. Richard and Linda, my parents, gave quick hugs, but their faces stayed tight, polite. My cousins filled the room with chatter about the weather and sales at the mall, their laughter rising and falling like background noise. Daniel caught my eye across the table, a silent question. "There, do you feel it too?" I busied myself with arranging the dishes. Turkey in the center, green beans for Mom, pecan pie for Dad, a bottle of wine Mark had once mentioned liking. I thought if I set the scene just right, maybe they'd meet me halfway. My son Benjamin hovered nearby, straightening napkins, his small fingers careful watching me for cues. He didn't say anything, but his raised eyebrow mirrored my own unease. The first toast was about a cousin's new car, the second about a neighbor's baby. Each one passed like a reminder that tonight wasn't really about me. Still, I told myself there was time. I kept picturing their smiles when I shared my news. I'd worked too hard for them not to be proud. As the last dish landed on the table, the jazz skipped for a beat, a faint crackle in the speaker. A chill slid under the door from the porch, brushing my ankles. The laughter at the table felt a little too loud, a little too practiced. I reached for my glass, forcing a smile, holding the moment steady like a photograph. Then Mark cleared his throat and pushed back his chair. All eyes turned. My hand tightened on the carving knife without thinking. For a heartbeat, everything in the room went still, and I knew the night I'd planned was about to turn into something else entirely. Mark's glass caught the light as he lifted it, but before any words came, a hush swept the table. The smell of roasted turkey mixed with the faint metallic tang of tension. I could hear Benjamin's fork scrape softly against his plate, then stop. Daniel shifted beside me, his knee brushing mine under the table like an anchor. I'd seen this pattern before: the small slights at birthdays, the forgotten invitations to reunions, the quiet glances between my parents and Mark. Tonight, though, it was more than glances. Their quick hugs at the door, their tight smiles, all of it had been signs I tried to ignore. Now the signs felt like a drum roll. I reached for the serving spoon, my fingers steady, though my chest felt hollow. Around me, the conversation thinned, laughter dying off in uneven bursts. The jazz track changed to something slower, a trumpet line curling through the room like smoke. I caught Linda's eye across the table. She looked away first, fiddling with her napkin. Richard's hand hovered over his wine glass, circling the rim without touching it. Benjamin leaned closer, whispering a question I couldn't make out. I squeezed his hand under the table instead of answering. The gesture was for both of us, a promise I'd keep myself composed. Daniel's palm covered mine, warm and solid. He didn't speak, but his eyes held a quiet question. "Are you ready for whatever's next?" I glanced at my phone screen, face down beside my plate. The bank notification still glowed faintly before fading out. 5 years of transfers, repairs, premiums, all sitting there in digital silence. No one at this table knew the weight of it, not really. No one except Daniel and me. The turkey's skin crackled under the knife as I carved a practiced motion. Pecan pie waited by the window, candles flickering. Everything looked like a holiday ad, but the air had that brittle stillness just before a glass shatters. Across from me, Mark lowered his glass slightly, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Cousins leaned forward, sensing a performance. I inhaled slowly, feeling the heat rise along my collarbones, and let the breath out just as slow. My smile stayed fixed, the one I'd practiced in mirrors and meetings. This was the moment between the intake of breath and the breaking of news, between the clatter of applause and the silence after. I didn't know yet exactly what Mark would say, but I knew the pattern. I knew how they saw me. And as I looked at them, my parents, my brother, my relatives with their waiting eyes, something in me shifted like a door swinging quietly on its hinges. Mark's smirk widened as he finally spoke. "Mom and Dad said you never contribute to this family," he announced, his tone light, almost playful, but the words slammed into me like cold water. For a heartbeat, the room seemed to brighten, cousins chuckling, someone even clapping as if it were a punchline. I felt the sound hit my chest like little jabs, each clap a small cut. I kept my eyes on the tablecloth, smoothing an invisible wrinkle. My fork hovered above the turkey, the scent suddenly heavy. Across from me, Richard nodded at Mark's words. Linda pressed her lips together, a tiny, satisfied smile flashing before she reached for her wine. It wasn't the first time they'd dismissed me, but never like this, never in front of everyone. Under the table, Daniel's hand found mine. He didn't squeeze hard, just rested there, a steady warmth against the cold creeping up my arms. Benjamin sat stiffly beside me, his fork frozen, mid-air eyes darting from Mark to me. I could feel his confusion, the question he didn't dare ask. The jazz track wound down to a low hiss between songs. Mark lifted his glass again, looking around for approval. "We all know who really carries the weight," he added with a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. A cousin chuckled nervously. Someone cleared their throat. I forced a small smile, one I'd learned at boardrooms and bank counters. My heart hammered, but my voice stayed quiet. "Is that so?" I said softly, not lifting my gaze. The silverware clinked against plates. Linda reached for a roll, tearing it in half, two fast crumbs, scattering like small secrets. Every detail sharpened, the flicker of candlelight on glassware, the faint crack in the ceiling above Richard's head, the way Mark's watch glinted as he gestured. Years of late-night certifications and quiet transfers scrolled through my mind like a ledger. I'd told myself it was duty, not silence, but silence had a weight, and tonight it pressed on my chest until my breath came shallow. Across the table, Mark chuckled again, sensing no resistance. "Guess some of us just don't pitch in," he said. A cousin murmured agreement. The words hung like smoke. Daniel shifted beside me, his thumb brushing my knuckles, once grounding me. I inhaled slowly, my gaze finally rising to meet Mark's. His smirk flickered for just a moment. The room felt like it was holding its breath. I let my fork rest on the plate, the quiet clink louder than the chatter had been. The muscles in my shoulders uncoiled one by one. Tonight wasn't going to end the way they thought. I watched Mark bask in the brief applause, his shoulders squared as if he'd won something. Richard took a slow sip of wine, eyes avoiding mine, while Linda buttered her roll with steady strokes, her hands trembling just enough to catch the candlelight. The table's chatter faltered, then picked up in low murmurs. It was the kind of moment where people pretend nothing happened, hoping the sting will dissolve on its own. I kept my expression calm, fingers tracing the edge of my napkin. Daniel's knee pressed against mine again, a silent question I'd answer soon. Benjamin shifted beside me, his small hand inching toward mine but stopping midway. He'd never seen me like this, quiet but coiled, holding back words sharper than any knife on the table. Mark filled his glass, tilting it toward a cousin. "Some of us just do what we can," he said, chuckling. "Others, well..." His glance flicked at me, quick as a blade. A cousin tried to laugh but choked on a crumb instead. The sound echoed in the hush. I caught Linda watching me from the corner of her eye. Her lips moved, but no words came. Richard's knuckles whitened around his stemmed glass. They'd built a story and expected me to sit quietly inside it. For years I had. Tonight the story was cracking. The jazz track changed again, a trumpet note bending like a question. I set my fork down, letting it rest across the plate. The silver made a clean, soft click that turned a few heads. My pulse slowed, each beat clearer than the conversation around me. I didn't speak yet. I let the weight of their words settle back over the table. Daniel's thumb traced circles on my palm under the cloth. Benjamin's eyes darted to mine, waiting. In that small pause, I felt the years of bank transfers, roof repairs, insurance premiums line up behind me like invisible witnesses. Mark raised his glass again, but his smirk had dulled. "Guess that's just how it is," he muttered. No one clapped this time. A cousin's spoon clinked against a bowl, the sound loud in the sudden quiet. I drew a breath and lifted my gaze, fully meeting Mark's eyes without flinching. The candle flame between us flickered once, casting our shadows long across the table. Something in his expression shifted, a flicker of uncertainty, like he'd stepped onto thin ice. The silence stretched until even the candles seemed to burn more slowly. I straightened in my chair, palms resting flat on the table, and felt Daniel's quiet strength beside me. My heart was steady now, the kind of calm that comes before a decision you've rehearsed 100 times. Mark's glass hovered halfway to his lips, his smirk gone. Richard stared at his plate. Linda's hands trembled around her napkin. I let my gaze travel around the table, once taking in each face, the cousin's curiosity, the glint of silverware, the muted glow of wine and crystal. Then I smiled, not a broad grin, just a small curve that felt like the end of a long-held breath. "Perfect," I said softly. The single word cut through the hush like a match struck in a dark room. I picked up my phone from beside my plate and turned it face up. The bank app still glowed faintly, my thumb hovering above the cancel button. "Then the $8,000 I've been sending every month ends tonight?" I said, my voice calm and clear. I didn't raise it, didn't explain. I simply laid the truth on the table like another dish. Mark blinked, his mouth opening, but no sound coming out. Richard choked on his wine, coughing hard, his napkin pressed to his mouth. Linda's fork clattered to her plate, her face draining to a ghostly pale. The cousins froze, mid-bite, eyes darting between us. Daniel's hand tightened on mine under the cloth, an anchor in the sudden shift. I set the phone down with a quiet click, the screen confirming the transfers canceled. That small sound echoed louder than any shout. For a moment, no one moved. The jazz track had slipped into silence, leaving only the faint hum of the refrigerator. "You think I don't contribute?" I asked, still calm, eyes sweeping the table. "Fine. You're on your own." Each word landed without rush, like stones placed carefully. I didn't list the roof repairs, the insurance premiums, the grocery runs. I didn't have to. The math was already unraveling behind their eyes. Mark's hands tightened on his glass. Richard coughed again, slower now, eyes watering. Linda stared at her plate, her lips moving soundlessly. A cousin shifted uncomfortably, their chair creaking in the stillness. Benjamin sat wide-eyed, watching me as if seeing me for the first time. I lifted my water glass, took a sip, and set it down gently. "Dinner looks great," I said. "Shall we?" My voice stayed level, but the air in the room had changed. It felt lighter, electric, as if a storm had passed and left everything sharper. Mark's chair creaked as he lowered himself back down, eyes narrowing like he was recalculating every assumption he'd ever made about me. The cousins exchanged glances, their earlier laughter dying into small coughs and nervous sips of wine. Even the flicker of the candles seemed to hesitate, throwing our shadows large and strange across the walls. I didn't speak further. Silence did the work. Richard dabbed at his mouth with his napkin, his cough subsiding but his face still flushed. Linda stared at the tablecloth as though it might explain itself, her fingers twisting the fabric into knots. For 5 years I'd made their mortgage, their insurance, their repairs possible. For 5 years they'd treated it like air, necessary but invisible. Tonight I'd taken that air away. Daniel's thumb moved in a slow circle on the back of my hand, grounding me. Across from us, Benjamin sat straighter, his eyes bright, a small smile flickering at the corners of his mouth. He didn't speak either, but I could feel his pride like a quiet warmth. Mark tried again, his voice low. "You're really going to do this?" Over one comment, his words felt thin, already unraveling. I met his gaze without blinking. "It's not one comment," I said softly. "It's years of being invisible to you all." A murmur ran through the cousins, a spoon clattered against a bowl. Someone reached for water, knocking a knife askew. The whole table seemed to shift in its seats as if the floor had tilted. I stayed still, letting the noise pass over me. Linda finally looked up, eyes glistening but no apology on her lips. Richard's hand hovered near his wine again but didn't lift it. Mark sat back, folding his arms, jaw tight, but no comeback came. The power in the room had flipped without a shout, without a single raised voice. I reached for my napkin, laid it neatly across my plate, and glanced at Daniel. He gave the smallest nod. Around us, the jazz track clicked back on a slow piano line, threading into the quiet. The sound felt like punctuation, a new sentence beginning. I picked up my glass, took another sip, and let my gaze drift to Benjamin. He was still watching me, shoulders relaxed now. I gave him a small smile, the kind that meant it's done. The following weeks unfolded like a quiet clearing after a storm. Messages from my parents trickled in, at first polite but clipped, then stopped altogether. No more calls from Mark either. The group chat went silent, their names sitting at the top of my phone like ghosts. Each evening when I walked into our kitchen, I felt the difference. No buzzing, no guilt, no waiting for the next demand. I poured my energy into small, steady things. Saturday mornings making pancakes with Benjamin, evenings walking the dog with Daniel under the soft glow of streetlights. We laughed at shows we'd never had time for. The house began to feel lighter, as though someone had opened a window. For the first time in years, my money stayed in my account past the first of the month. One afternoon, a cousin texted me a photo of my parents' house, the porch empty, a realtor's sign staked in the yard. They'd moved to a smaller apartment across town. I stared at the image for a long moment, my thumb hovering over the screen. There was no rush of victory, no sharp satisfaction. Just a quiet ache, like an old bruise you'd forgotten until someone pressed it. That night, I opened a drawer in my office and found the folder of receipts, 5 years of checks, 5 years of transfers. The faded ink told the story my family never would. I didn't keep them out of spite. They were my reminder not to slide back into the old pattern. I slipped the folder back into the drawer, closed it gently, and exhaled. Benjamin wandered in, holding a math workbook, his hair sticking up from a nap. "Can you help me with this problem?" he asked, eyes bright. I smiled, motioning him to sit beside me. As we worked through the numbers, he leaned into my shoulder, the way he used to when he was little. That simple weight steadied me more than any apology could. Later, while he read on the couch, I brewed tea and stood at the window. Across the street, lights flickered in other houses, other families moving through their evenings. Mine was here now, Daniel humming in the kitchen, Benjamin's laughter drifting down the hall. The noise of obligation was gone, replaced by something softer. A notification pinged on my phone, but I didn't check it. I'd blocked enough numbers to know it wouldn't be worth reading. Instead, I set the phone face down, wrapped my hands around the mug, and let the steam rise. In that stillness, I felt the final strand of guilt slip loose. Weeks later, a card arrived in the mail with no return address. Inside was a short note in my mother's handwriting. "We're struggling. Please call." No apology, no recognition, just a plea. I held the paper for a long time, tracing the loops of her letters, then slid it back into the envelope and set it aside. I didn't tear it up. I didn't answer either. Silence was an answer of its own. Life went on. Daniel's firm landed a new client, and we celebrated with takeout and a movie on the couch. Benjamin made the honor roll his grin wide as he waved the certificate in the air. Our little family took a weekend trip to the mountains, hiking a trail lined with autumn leaves. At the summit, wind in my hair, I realized how light I felt, not from the climb, but from the absence of weight I used to carry. On the drive back, Benjamin asked again about my parents. I told him calmly, sometimes people take more than they give. Setting boundaries is a way of protecting yourself, even with family. He stared out the window for a moment and nodded like a seed had taken root. I hoped he'd grow up knowing his worth didn't depend on anyone's approval. That evening, while unpacking, I found an old family photo at the bottom of a bag, a picnic from years ago. Everyone laughing except me caught mid-blink at the edge of the frame. I almost tossed it, then slid it into a drawer instead. It wasn't a wound anymore, just a picture of who we'd been. Later, Daniel came up behind me, resting his chin on my shoulder. "You okay?" he murmured. I covered his hands with mine and nodded. We didn't need to say more. In the quiet hum of our kitchen, I felt the certainty of my choice settle deeper. I had stepped out of the role they wrote for me and into one I chose myself. As night fell, I switched off my phone, turned off the kitchen light, and joined Benjamin on the couch. He leaned against me half asleep while Daniel flipped channels. The room smelled of cinnamon and tea. Outside leaves rustled in the dark. For the first time in years, I felt wholly present. No noise, no shadows, just the three of us in the soft glow, building a life on our own terms. The table is empty now, but in my mind the echoes have faded into a quiet strength. Boundaries didn't burn bridges. They built a doorway to peace. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is step back, close the door softly, and let your worth speak louder than any apology that never comes.